So this presentation is about using that evaluation tool, so using this new tool to find what we call the big red flag, or the low-hanging fruit. How do you do an evaluation, go through all the data you're about to get to find the thing that will make the biggest gain to your player? Ultimately, we want the fastest gain also. So what's that thing that you can quickly change in order to kind of hook that player in to your, as we did earlier, the long-term development plan. So we don't want this. This is a great way to show them that wow factor, and that's the biggest thing with the evaluation, is to get the players that wow. You don't want them to leave without them just blown away. Holy cow, I can't believe you only took 10 minutes to figure out this problem I've been struggling with for 10 years. So we want to use all this data. What we're going to do is go through the evaluation page by page so you understand everything that's going on in the new report, and then show you different ways and techniques to use that data in your lesson, or in your evaluation plan, or in that new student intake plan. And ultimately, then be able to take that evaluation, build it out to be able to sell your sessions, your packages, your memberships, whatever it is that you do. The ultimate goal of the evaluation should make sales to your students easier. That's our goal, right? Get an investment, because you're investing in them, get them to invest and work with you. So the evaluation tool, and we do the evaluation through creating a new user. One of the new important things in the evaluation tool is it used to be just enter the name and make sure it was right or left-handed. Now if you can enter at least the date of birth or the birth year, that makes a difference. We are now putting everything together with gender and age. So we'll have the individual, professional, peer group. A lot of the things that we heard is guys and women who are older, why are you comparing me to a tour player? That's not what I want to be. So now we can be like, what's the average 62-year-old lady do in her golf swing? What's the average 70-year-old man do in his golf swing? Compare them to other players around the country. So then if there's stuff out of range, you're like, yeah, I know you're not going to get to the tour range, but even your peer group does this. Makes it easier for them to understand why we're doing this. It alternates between 5 driver swings and 5 6-iron swings. So you go driver, 6-iron, driver, 6-iron. The reason we did that is we didn't want somebody to lock in one move, and it kind of helps go with random practice. So it's not this blocked practice. They have to actually switch clubs, go from a tee to the ground over and over again, because that's how the golf course works. I hope we're not hitting back-to-back shots, right, from the same place. That's typically not a good thing.
So one of the things to note before or during these evaluation sessions, you're going to want to have a dialogue with your players first so that you can identify what their pain points are or what they're struggling with, and get them to tell you. You know, ask them some questions, get them to tell you what they're struggling with. Hopefully they just pumped 5 out of bounds on the previous round and you've got something really easy to work on. But try and find out as much information as you can, because it's going to make your life a lot easier when you're going into the evaluation, because you might find multiple red flags and you want to know the one to work on that's going to have the most significant emotional connection with that player, because that's what's going to help them improve the most or feel the best about improving, and then ultimately getting them to stick with you for a long time.
So looking at these pages, as we go across the screen, the first page is the overview page. When we're giving this out, this is one of the pages I typically would print out and hand to a student. I love to put things in the students' hands when they leave. It gives them something hard, something of value that I did this. It gives them a value. On this screen, there's a speed creation and a consistency. Speed creation is about how well they transfer energy and create speed throughout their body, going segment to segment, those overall speed gains from section to section. The consistency goes into how well they hit the same positions in the golf swing across those 5 swings, as well as their tempo and timing. Like, how consistent was their sequence? Did it go 1, 2, 3, 4, then 3, 1, 2? If those are more, if they're all over the place, the consistency score is going to be lower. Same thing with tempo. If one swings 3 to 1, and then you got a 4 to 1 and a 2.5 to 1, lower scores. So the little highlighted blue area there is their peer group. The peer group came from a collaboration with Dr. Rob Neal and his 4,000 players, and we took all that data and just sandwiched it into a giant database to give us, here's what their peer groups are doing from a speed gain, everything everything growing from there. The bottom sections there's a comment section. When you open up the report, when it populates, you can type in anything you want there. It's an active text box. So at the end of a lesson, you're going to want to make sure you fill out the ideas. Here's what we worked on. Here's why we worked on it. Give them the reasons you did. You did this poorly, but you did this well. Kind of make sure you reinforce that pain point, but also, hey, yeah, shoulder plane was really bad, but posture was great. Normally we'd start on posture. We get to start on shoulder plane. So it makes them feel better. And then finally, to me, the most important box there is the next step box. The next step box, now you're laying out your ideas and your plan for the player. It's, all right, this is going to take this long. This is the typical workflow that we would go through here. Telling them this isn't a one-time thing. It's something that we are going to build and grow and just show them that, yeah, just because you got it now doesn't mean that you've actually learned to do it better. So this is a really big thing, and especially when you're getting into that sales part of selling your packages, selling your lessons, selling memberships, however it's structured at your facility.
I'll take the swing characteristics. So the next page, the second page of the report is going to be the swing characteristics page in the middle there. So you can see it'll show you 5 columns for the 5 swings for that particular club, and it will give you 6 swing characteristics. And then in the boxes, it'll tell you whether the swing characteristic was present at all, if it was minor or just outside the range of that characteristic, or way outside the range for major. So a couple things from a coaching perspective on this particular page. I'd have to say this was probably the one that I was the most excited about for the report, because I felt it made the student experience much, much better. For example, player has flat shoulders. Historically, we'd have to go into 5 different motions into their upper body bend graph, look at the upper body side bend line, figure out if they were in flat shoulders, and then communicate that to them, all along them not understanding anything that I'm looking at. They don't know what the graph is, and I'm trying to tell them it's more for me than for them. Really poor student experience. Now they can see it right here. There's actually icons now to the left of each one of those swing characteristics so they could see it, they understand it, and then you can toggle, which I think is the coolest part, you can toggle back and forth between your 6-iron and your driver. We know players' movement patterns don't always stay the same, especially from a shorter club to a longer club. So now if you have a player that comes in, hits their irons great but struggles with their driver, you have a direct answer about why that is, okay? And you can really start to communicate that very simply to them.
And when we're finding that big red flag, right here in this example, I have one that says major. In this, none is within normal ranges, minor is outside of 1 standard deviation, so normal is 66% of the population. Outside 1 is 90%. Major is in the outside 5% on both ends. If you have a bunch of those popping up, you're well out of range. This is a big issue. It makes it easy to point out. If this player walked in our door and said, hey, you know what? Like, my game's okay, but man, my back kills me after I play 2 rounds. What do we know about reverse spine angle? Leading cause of back pain in golf. Oh, your back hurts you after playing a couple competitive rounds. Well, check this out. Now we have this cold, hard data saying, hey, if you reverse spine, you will hurt your back. It causes back pain in golf. They had this giant major just punching him in the face. That's really easy to communicate of why now we're going to work on this.
And I'd recommend as you go through this and as we start to go through each page and you're trying to find that big red flag, make it simple for the player. You know, it might be positions, it might be speeds, or it might be consistency. Okay, so always try and boil it down to something that the player is going to understand, and then you could always layer on a little bit more complexity. Like, for example, if it's speed that they're struggling with and they can't, hit it far enough, well then we're going to try and revert that back to maybe a position or potential characteristic. So again, paint that picture for them, let them know that you have the answer, and that this will help you get to the solution much quicker.
So the next page in the report is a consistency page. The consistency page is looking at the averages across all the swings and the deviations between swing to swing. So the smaller the number, the better they repeated. The larger the number, the more the repetition was all over the place. We'll get into this, we're going to break this down a little further, but at different positions, there's kind of different norms of what, at least through our experience so far, of what I've adapted and Joe's adapted to. Hey, like we'll say at address, under 2 degrees, we're pretty good. But at a really dynamic position like impact, those ranges might be slightly bigger just because they're moving at high speeds. So it's going to be very tough for them to be at less than 2, 3, something like that.
So we have our position averages page that come next. The position averages page is going to tell you the average of the 5 motions for that club in the column that says you, so that's your player, and then it'll compare it to the pro range below that. So it's a quick snapshot of where they were at address, top, and impact with their body and the wrist. So after the position averages page, now we're looking at our speeds page. So at the top there, it's going to be the average speed for each segment on that row, and then the orange shaded area is the pro range. So you can get an idea very quickly of the average speed, and then we break that down further in the chart at the bottom. So we have all 5 swings down at the bottom, and we show the average again, plus the average of the pro and the average of the peer in terms of speed per segment.
The next page is into your sequencing page. So now you don't have to go draw that up. The top is your transition sequence of each and every swing. Again, if those change every swing, that means it's not a real repeatable motion. And so we're trying to look for consistency. That goes into that consistency number on the first page. The bottom one is the peaking order. Same thing, if we start seeing lots of the numbers changing, that's an area of possible concern. And then the final page is the tempo page. I actually had some really cool experiences using the tempo page with people who didn't have a lot of positional issues and things like that, but swing tempos were, I had one guy said he had the fastest backswing in the history of man, no faster. His tempo was 5-1. I said, no, you don't. I was able to show him this page. We actually went into some drills working on tempo and getting him to think less. It went from shanking everything to by 10 minutes later, he'd hit a 6-iron 15 yards farther than he'd ever hit it in his life, just by working on his tempo and getting him closer to that 3-to-1 ratio. I think that we have a lot of research that says that 3-to-1 is pretty good for long game. Short game, so it's just a 2-to-1.
So real quick, so when you're looking for that big red flag, okay, we talked a little bit about, I think we have to break it apart into a 2-step process. So we talked first about what area are we looking in for that red flag. Is it positions? Is it speed? Is it consistency? Is it tempo? Whatever it might be. Then you have to break it down a step further, right? This is going into your plan. What do you want to tackle now, and what are you going to tackle long term with the student? So after you identify that big red flag, identify whether it's concept related, is it a motor pattern that they've had for a long time, or is it related to an injury, right? Because it's going to be much different in terms of process for concept, motor pattern, or physical limitation, right? So again, whether you have a one-time student there or a long-term student, you're going to try and figure out which is the best route now and then long-term. Because if it's a physical limitation, you might have to bring a fitness professional or a medical professional in to make some meaningful changes, right? So that really is going to be key.
And in this page, these questions to ask. These are some of the questions that we wanted to ask our players. What are the players' goals? We'll sit there and had this call. I had this small talk when the player's doing the evaluation. Hey, I'm just gonna have you hit 10 balls. Let's go fire away, and then I'll ask them a few questions. Hey, why you want to take lessons? Why are you here? That type of thing. Is this like a problem that just crept up, or is this something you've been fighting forever? I personally call it the jump off the bridge miss, or the clubs in the lake miss. It's which I have them say, man, if you're on the golf course and you see this shot, you just want to take your clubs and just throw them in the garbage. It gives me an idea. Now if I see multiple things that could be red flags, I'm going to go to the one that I know is more likely to cause that miss. And then finally, going into their patterns. Have these conversations kind of establishing that rapport with the player, so now as soon as the report populates, you have an idea of where do you want to go. The last thing I want is to have my players standing there for very long. I want to be able to go through this, know what I want to find, and get them into biofeedback as quick as I possibly can. Because now they can feel what we want them to do. Feel the fix. We talk about that wow moment. in here, how many use K-Vest regularly or a little bit? How many put biofeedback on yourself? If you haven't, do it. You've never experienced something that feels so big in your head and is really so small by number. It's crazy. The 4 areas that we have that we go to find that big red flag first, obviously the first page is that swing characteristics page. That one's really easy to communicate with your players. Again, if there's a major that jumps up there, it's a really good place to go. So, super flat shoulders and they're all over the place with delivery of the path. Well, here we go. We're going to jump right there. So we're going to look at those areas that show up in the majority of the swings. This player has a minor and a major across 5 tasks. So it's now, if I'm going to pick the spin or the reverse spine angle, how does it relate to the ball flight that's driving them crazy? Does that make sense? Now, if I have two possible areas to improve, which one's going to make the biggest impact on what's driving them crazy? The second one, consistency page. I've highlighted in the box here, this is actually a mini tour player. We did a capture at impact. I have a 7, a 7, and a 9. So pretty big deviation for a high level player at impact. Rules of thumb that Joe and I have spoke about just from trying this, we've had this for a few more months than it's been out, but address, I look for less than 2 degrees of deviation. If it's under 2, not real worried about it. This player, again, high level player, look how consistent that address position is. Almost within a half degree in 2 parts. That's pretty good. Top of the backswing, a little faster movement, I give him 3. Impact, I give him 5. Wrist, I give him up to 8 or more, because think about how small this gear is. We talk about 6 degrees of rotation is 1 minute on a clock. The smaller the gear, the harder it is to see. The higher the speeds, probably the more variability that we're going to have in that segment. Does that make sense? So I would also highlighted the 12.2 on the deviation at the top of his backswing. So sometimes he sets the club, sometimes he doesn't. So we can pick those different areas.
When you go in to work with them, then you go back into measure and have them same. Then you have the normal graphs.
Yep. And you can do that. Or now if I saw that position, I might go to that position page where we have position at impact. So now I'm going to look at his numbers versus the tour player numbers versus his peer group numbers. And I might build biofeedback to show him and then tighten that range up to maybe 2 or 3 degrees and have him work on trying to hit that range. So I'm going to
DVT and all that.
Yeah, I'd jump right into that DVT and the biofeedback from there. The goal of taking this, when you're finding that big red flag and you want to get that wow moment, the faster you can get them into biofeedback where they can feel what you're asking them to do, one, it helps with your communication. Because if we all stood up in this room and I had you all rotate as far as you could and asked you where you felt it, we'd probably get 20 different answers. So as an instructor, I have to have 20 different ways to explain how this should feel. I have in biofeedback, I'm saying this is where you're supposed to be, tell me what you feel. I don't have to search for that target anymore. And at my place in my book, I'll write a little note like, he feels it here. And now every time I pull up his folder, I'm making sure I'm using this term with him or her. This is, again, I'm going to look here. If I see low numbers outside, the guy or the woman who comes in, I want to hit it farther. And all of a sudden you show them that 3 of their speeds are really low. It's kind of a big step up saying, we got to do something about this, right? Yeah, you want to hit it 250, but these speeds are telling me you hit it 200. Something's got to occur here. It opens up that dialogue, opens up that discussion of, is it realistic that player's going to leave you hitting at 250? If your body parts aren't moving that fast, then what's our plan to help you develop that speed? Is it possible? And then on the bottom, we'll look at, again, different player, above peer, but below tour, and this player is that aspiring tour player. We might push more to that number, and so I would highlight, here are 2 big deficiencies. He's low in his pelvis, low in his upper body. So we got to do things to speed that up. The arms and club are pretty good. And then finally, the tempo. Looking at this one, this player, different player, 3 or 4 to 1 on pretty much every swing. The same player said, my backswing is really, really fast, faster than the tour guys, and he's over 1 second, and the tour players are 0.75. And so I was able to say, are you really faster than the tour guys? Are you swinging back that fast? A lot of people feel that from a sequencing issue, is that they don't transition correctly, so they pull the club quick, and their body doesn't have enough time to get out of the way, which makes them feel fast. Tempo is one of the things that people just don't get. It's really hard to feel that tempo. It's why the tour tempo stuff worked, and just hearing that beep. And if you've ever done that, it's really hard to make that swing at that pace sometimes because you're thinking about it. And actually, one of the tiles, you can actually have tempo pop up in one of the tiles. So in every swing, you can show them their tempo on every swing. So they're like, oh, I swung faster that time. No, you didn't. Now they get that instant feedback. It's a different way of not using biofeedback, but using feedback on every swing. Similar to what you would do on a launch monitor. When you're working on path or face, you can show them on every swing, did they make that change?
I think there's a distinct flow now. So with the addition of the evaluation and tiles, we have a very simple workflow that can follow evaluate, train, measure, okay? Meaning you evaluate the player when they come in, identify the big red flag, use your biofeedback to train, and then once they're done with biofeedback, unlike before, where we maybe didn't know if the biofeedback was sticking, right, or maybe didn't do it long enough, or we were doing the wrong thing, now after biofeedback, you can have them hit shots with the tiles up, and you can see if your biofeedback program was successful or not. And just take them right back through that loop. If it was successful, keep the tiles up, let them see they're doing the right things, let them dial it in. If it was unsuccessful, go back to the biofeedback and maybe rework your program, or maybe you identified the wrong thing in the evaluation, or you go all the way back, right? So at least you have a flow back and forth that you can take with each and every student.
Yeah. And this tempo ones, to me, is very valuable. I've done 3D captures for 15 years, about 30,000 captures. I can count on one hand how many people are really too fast. And that's a common thing when we break them down, that tempo is too slow. Part of it allows them to think more. Sometimes when you think more bad things can happen. So that's why I think a lot of the better players have that quicker tempo, is it's just reactionary, it's not a thought out process.
So you can decide your approach, right? Every coach is different. We all have different philosophies, but some of the common approaches that we use to correct would be ground up, right? So if you have a player is a long-term player, you have more time with them, you might want to focus from feet to pelvis and all the way up. You can go club down, right? So wrist first. You can go address first. So ground up, address first would be more of that long-term student. You need more time to get through, the entire body and all the positions. Or you can start at impact, right? So everybody's got different philosophies, and these might change depending upon the player's goals and their time commitments.
Again, the biggest thing about this evaluation tool is getting that wow. It's been able to get that player to feel what's going on. So the way we do that is first we start with the evaluation. It shouldn't take very long. I mean, somebody asked earlier, this is a 30-minute session. This would be like an initial 30-minute walk-up session. I should be able to do all of this inside of 30 minutes. You get them right into biofeedback. I've identified the problem. Now let's let them feel the problem. It's amazing. Those of you who have practiced in biofeedback know what I'm talking about, of when you're trying to make what might be a 2 or 3 degree change in something, and you feel it, and you feel like you're a different place. High level players, we had one coach that asked to make them just a little steeper. We increased side bend 3 degrees. All we saw was this. We saw this and that. Well, when we asked him what's that feel like, he told me this. He felt like his shoulder was pointing at the floor, and we changed him 3 degrees. That's a really hard thing to practice and feel. So on every swing, and we're not going to see it. If you can see 3 degrees of rotation at speed, I want to hang out with you forever. That's really hard. So using that, now the music, he feels like he's overcorrected or she's overcorrected, and the music says, no, you're right where we want you. No, you're right where we want you. It allows them to practice properly. I'd much rather have high quality reps than reps. If I'm going to break a habit, I want them to do it right. And if you haven't done biofeedback for a long time, try to do something you don't do well for more than 10 minutes and tell me how tired you are. most people are just pouring sweat by that point. They're working so hard. I have more people tap out of a 30-minute session because they're exhausted from doing it right, which leads to a whole nother program of this is why we need to do this more often. So using your drills, like we said, tempo. What are some of the best tempo drills you know if you see somebody's tempo is a 5-to-1 and they're struggling with that? Go through your collective knowledge. There's so much knowledge for everybody in here. Pull drills that you know work well for this type of thing. Not everything can be put on biofeedback. Hopefully with the tiles, we can actually take away some of the stuff that we had to guess on before, such as tempo. But use that stuff to help add to your toolbox. You're here because you've taught a lot of people. We want to make it easier and more effective and more efficient for you, because I keep going to that wow moment. That wow moment gets you long-term clients. If they know you care and they can see that change right away, or at least feel what you're trying to get them to do, they haven't done that if they haven't been on a 3D system or used biofeedback. It's a completely new concept to them. And we use it with players. The youngest players I've had we play with it with a couple of the young kids. They're like, hey, can I get on that picture machine that makes noise? Yeah, they're 7 and 8 and they just think it's fun. Like we might just do like a setup thing. And then my oldest client uses it as 93. Has a great time with it. So much so I had to talk him out of buying one.
Yeah, so just to summarize everything here, just using the evaluation report, easy to give the player too much information. There's so much information in this evaluation report. I stressed it in the presentation earlier, I'll stress it again. Only show them one thing at a time, maybe two if it ties together. It's very easy for the player to become overwhelmed with this report. Okay, so again, like the graphs, if you show them too much, you're going to lose them. Okay, so structure it, create your structure, one thing at a time, whatever your approach is, right? Address, ground up, impact back, whatever it is, create your plan, and then deliver the points as you go. Okay?
So we've talked about this quite a bit, is just using that biofeedback, picking that program, getting that feel. Very important to help them correlate what they're hearing versus what they're supposed to feel and what they're supposed to do. It's really hard if you take somebody to a position and they don't know how they got there. The chances of them practicing that as soon as they leave you is very small. If I can give them a feel that they can take internally, they can take that with them. They can try to find that feel when they're practicing on their own. It's to look at a position unless you have a trained eye. Like I said, those motions are small. They're going to think, I say we have two people, overcorrectors and undercorrectors. You have the person you give lessons to, you show them what to do, and when they come back, you got to take them back the other way. Or you get the person you get the same lesson to over and over again. But I'm practicing it. No, you're not. You know, you've seen that person walk down the range to hit more balls. 10 minutes later, you look down and you're like, what are you doing? That isn't what we talked about. But in their head, that's what they felt, that's what they're doing. By giving them a more concrete feel, they're much more likely to work on it correctly when they leave.
Yeah, and then combining that with using your own drills. As Jason mentioned, biofeedback might not be suitable for some players or some problem areas. So again, everybody has some collective knowledge. You have your own drills. Use those in addition to biofeedback as a complement, and you're really going to be on your way to getting the players better with the combination of that. And then finally, the hook. What do I give my student to take with them? So that first page is what you want to give them. Let them take it home with them. They'll have your comments. They'll have your next steps. So use that as the hook to get them back in the door. Okay, so there's nothing better than to have a physical piece of paper with your player, so every time they take it out, and they'll have to take it out to get reminded of what you went over, I guarantee it, they'll think of you, they'll come back, okay? So use that to your advantage. And I tell you, for those of you who are using the evaluation right now, use it as much as you can, get fluid with it so that you're comfortable. If you're not using the evaluation, let's get you back in the loop so you can get this evaluation, because this evaluation was on morning drive this morning. I can tell you that there are going to be people coming in your door looking to get evaluated. So let's get you ready to get evaluating these students and turn them into long-term clients.
Yeah, and the second thing about that page, if you give that to a client, How many of you think that he's going to hand that to all his friends and say, hey, look what I did? There's your referral source. Now they have something hard to pass out that you've given them. Is somebody else doing that for them? No. So their friends are all of a sudden be like, well, if John's doing it, why am I not doing that?
And then you could sell your services after that evaluation and you've gone through that initial session. They have that wow moment. You've got the connection with the player. Use the evaluation to promote any packages you have. You could bundle services together. You could use the evaluation for swing fixes or club fitting and then book it out on the spot. As we said, make sure you get them on your books for as long as possible so that they are ready to go and it's consistent. So the 10 swings you capture in your evaluation, they will show up in your client manager as individual motions just like they always have. So you can go in and navigate through the software like you've done up till we came out with the evaluation. That's still there. Thank you.